Hey there, everybody. It's Coach Edwards with LacrosseGoalieTips.com and LacrosseGoalieUniversity.com. And today I've got a little bit of a longer post, so this might take a little bit. You may want to download the transcript once we have that ready and print it off and read it as you can. And do me a favor and share this with as many people as you can. It doesn't have to be just goalies for this post either, because what I want to talk to you about today is how to get recruited to play lacrosse. Now, this isn't obviously this is an interesting topic to a lot of people, and a lot of athletes have aspirations to play in college. And as you may know, so I married a Canadian a number of years ago. I'm originally from Boston, but I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I travel a fair bit. And so through this blog and through my other blogs, I really have an interesting kind of finger on kind of the overall feeling about recruiting, living in Canada. What's kind of interesting here, being from Boston, where it's the highest concentration of colleges and universities in the world, and also being an American, where our culture is there's a huge interest in collegiate sports, right? Like in the NCAA, like we're watching football and basketball, and depending on what part of the country we're from, if we don't have a professional team, our college team is all that much more alluring, right? So, but living in Canada, where athletes don't really have that, there's local universities that have tremendous educations at a tremendous value, and a lot of kids will go to the university to play lacrosse if someone's going to give them a scholarship, but otherwise they're probably not going to go. They're just going to go to somewhere local where they live. Or somewhere else across Canada. But the point is that there's a lot of to kind of do this in a black and white sort of situation. On one side of the fence, there's coaches who are like, they coach, nonprofit, and they give their time, and the message is with hard work and dedication that anything can happen. And then on the other side, there are, strictly like for-profit clubs and guys who are making like the bulk of their income, if not all of their income, on what I call, they're filling their car with the gas of the hopes and dreams of the young athletes that they coach, right? And I fall kind of in the middle. I run a youth program that is for profit, and I didn't used to do that because my goal was I wanted to be able to derive the majority of my income from something else, so that my advice would be unbiased. Now my advice is still unbiased, and you're going to get that here. But what's interesting is that I've fallen in the boat where, to get more respect as a coach, I need to run a for-profit program, if that makes sense, which is really kind of a shame in a lot of ways. But it's one of the reasons why I do this blog for free, and I have a business that kind of runs on the backside of it. But if you saw like the numbers and the amount of money I made from it, it would shock you at how little that made. All right, so I want to, just for full disclosure, I want to share with you where I'm coming from, but also there's good sides and bad sides to this. And there's people who will say like, oh, if you spend thousands of dollars and you go on this travel team and you go to this camp, or if you go to this showcase event, you're going to get recruited to play in college. That's wrong. Like, that's not true. It's possible, but it's not fully reality. Now, on the other side of the fence, there's kind of that idea that, hey, if you're the diamond in the rough, someone's going to find you. Well, that's not 100% true either. So what I want to share with you in this video today is kind of to cover the middle spectrum, okay? And what I want to start by sharing with you is this is the bottom line about getting recruited to play lacrosse in college. The number one thing that college coaches are looking for are athletes. Okay, that is the first thing. All right, so if you take two lacrosse players of equal skill, okay, and the one who is the better athlete has the better chance for success. Okay, that's just a reality, and it's a reality in any sport. If you take a hockey player, a basketball player, a football player, and they're technically the same, The one that is physically, athletically superior is the one who gets recruited. Now, you may have heard of some stories. One of probably the most famous one is Dom Starsia, who's the head coach of the University of Virginia. I actually had a chance to be coached by Dom when I was in junior high school, back when he was at Brown with Pete Lasagna, who is at Bates. This was a long time ago, but I used to go down to a camp on the evenings and get coached by those guys. And I remember Dom saying then that athletes are the ones who he recruits. And he was he didn't play lacrosse until his freshman year of college at Brown. And then he became an All-American by the time he graduated. And a number of years ago, I was at the Jake Reed Nike Blue Chip event watching two of my athletes play. And I was sitting next to a dad from Chicago. And his son was actually recruited by Dom based on his basketball footage, not his lacrosse footage, which was really fascinating. And I've heard that story over and over and over again. And just to kind of further this conversation, every year, every time the Summer Olympics happens, and just to prove to you why athleticism trumps skill in a lot of places, or coaches wish it did, or plan that it does. Every time the Summer Olympics happens and there's the 100-meter dash. So the last, in Beijing, Usain Bolt, right, from Jamaica, blew everybody away with a world record time in the 100-meter dash. This happens every Olympics. Afterwards, those guys end up signing a tryout contract with some professional soccer team, usually. Because why? The coaches of the soccer team are just hoping that, wow, if we could teach that guy how to play some soccer, he could outrun everybody and we just get him the ball and he'd score all the time, right? That happens all the time. It also happens in other sports. In 2014-15, or going into the 2015-16 football season in the NFL, a rugby player from Australia, I believe, signed with the San Francisco 49ers. I believe that's the team, if I've got my numbers correct. But what that shows you is that coaches are looking for athleticism and trying to bring it into their sport, because they know that a better athlete with equal skill will always trump the athlete with the lesser athletic ability. So rule number one, coaches recruit athletes. And that's somewhat true for lacrosse goalies, because we've seen some goalies that are kind of bigger, slower, not necessarily the best in shape, but they've got fast hands, a nice stable base, and they can stop the ball. Okay, so that's it. But still, athleticism is key. Now, from here, the number two thing that lacrosse coaches look for are, is he a good kid? All right, I can speak as a coach of high school athletes and junior high school athletes that whenever I'm talking to a college level coach, and it doesn't matter where they are on the spectrum, Division I, Division II, Division III, MCLA, Division I, Division II, they all ask, is he a good kid? That's it, hands down. It always happens. Now, coaches are willing to kind of make exceptions on the is he a good kid or not, depending on where they're at. And I would say that when you go down from Division I, it becomes a bit of a gray area. Coaches are willing to take a flyer on a kid who's maybe not the best kid, but is a great athlete, depending on the school. Okay, so but is he an athlete first? Is she an athlete first as well? And is he or she a good kid? That's number two. Number three is, do they have the grades to come to my school? Right? Because if they don't have the grades, it doesn't matter how good a lacrosse player they are, coach can't make it work. Okay, when I was in high school and I was competing in the sport of luge through my I would basically go to school for the fall, the 2 to 3 weeks in the fall, and then I was gone all the way till spring semester. So I was basically putting myself through school with we didn't have tutors on the senior national team, and so because of that, my grades suffered and my SAT suffered. And back then, for what this is worth, I got a 1070 on my SAT. I got recruited by the lacrosse coach at Yale University, right, an Ivy at the time. The number they needed me to really hit was 1100. And so I wasn't there. And because of that, no matter how good a lacrosse player was, I wasn't getting in. So just as an example of if, and coaches are always trying to, depending on the school, Ivy League schools, much higher SAT responsibility than maybe a non-Ivy League school, okay? But that's just one thing. Coaches, where money is involved, like they're going to the admissions office with their stack of players that they say, hey, we like these guys, and they usually grade them. That happened to me with the schools that I was recruited at coming out of high school. They said, okay, here's Jonathan Edwards. He's a lacrosse goalie. We'd like to have him. Here's where he fits in our pile. Do you have room for him? That's the kind of conversation that happens. Now, so is the player an athlete? Is he a good kid? Does he have the grades? Now's when you get into the can they play lacrosse? That's when now what a lot of people think is that a lot of kids think too is that the lacrosse thing is first. And really it is almost like, it's not there. That's when the lacrosse coach starts to go, like, is he a good enough player to play lacrosse at our school? And I would add there, do we have a need? Right? So a lot of goalies, actually any position, they go, oh, I want to play lacrosse at Johns Hopkins, right? Well, so does everybody else, right? But let's say you have the skills to go to Johns Hopkins and you're a goalie, but they are like 6 deep, right, at the lacrosse goalie position, and you kind of slot in, you're not overly good that you're going to bump all those kids out. You're kind of somewhere in the middle. Well, a coach may or may not make that decision on you, right? They may just say, well, like, I don't need a goalie. And, from there, right, or even if it's an attackman or defenseman or a midi or a long pole or a face-off guy, the question arises, does that school have a need for your position, okay? And if they don't, then, your dream that you might be set on, it's out of your control. So whether you may be a really good goalie, you may be the best goalie, but they may already have the best goalie, and they may be having them for they may be coming in as a freshman, so they feel, okay? So what I want you to think about is, as a parent, as an athlete, as a coach watching this, is really helping your athletes understand that these are really the hierarchies. And this is what I have seen. All right, I'm speaking from my own experience. And my own experience dealing with other athletes who have gone on to play all the way up to Division I lacrosse, and all the way up to athletes who have gotten scholarship money at Division I lacrosse, of which there's not a lot of money. For Canadians who are watching this, I will share with you a conversation that I had privately with a Division I assistant lacrosse coach in regards to Canadian athletes specifically, where they said, you know what, we don't even look at Canadians, which shocked me because there's a lot of Canadians at a lot of Division I schools. But at their school, okay, where tuition is extremely high, all right, we're talking in the upper $40,000 a year range, probably pushing 50 now. Their approach is that, most Canadians want money. Like, that's their first thing, is that because they're comparing it against a college education back in Canada, which is a lot cheaper. So a lot of Canadian athletes are only interested in playing in the United States if they're going to get a scholarship. And a lot of times they can only afford that because with the exchange rate, a dollar US could cost a Canadian, especially right now, $1.25. All right, so basically you take a $50,000 or a $40,000, just for easy math, you take a $40,000 a year college education, and basically it's $50,000 a year for Canadian. All right, so some schools are only looking at Canadians and are willing to shell out money just to bring them because they feel like there's a big opportunity there, and they feel like the box lacrosse background they may have gives them an advantage, which I don't necessarily agree with. But as an American, if you're watching this and you're worried about Canadians coming down, here's where you've got to understand, like, this is what they're thinking of, okay? So this college coach I was talking to, they don't even bother going after Canadians because it's too expensive. And the other one, which this I hadn't really heard about this until I talked to him, was that a lot of Canadians want to come down as a package, like two guys, right? Brothers potentially, but not even brothers, just teammates, right? And we see that sometimes, right? We saw that with the Thompsons at Albany, but I don't know what their financial deal was. I don't know what, I'm sure it was pretty good, but I'm not speculating there. But that is just what I heard from this coach, and it's an interesting thing to consider. All right. A question that I encourage all parents to have with their kids right now is will you go to school if you're not playing lacrosse? Okay. So a lot of families will say, well, of course my son's going to go to school or my daughter's going to school if they don't play lacrosse. Well, okay, because that distinction will basically affect what schools you look at, right? Because what we're taught in the U.S. is when you apply to college, you have your A schools, like your reaches, you have the zone where you're like not your safeties, but so you get your reach schools, you've got your like sort of reach schools, and then you got your safety schools, the ones you're going to get into, right? And you apply to those three tiers. Well, some athletes, what I've seen happen recently is they get so set on those schools they don't even think they're a reach because their idea of who they are and how athletic they are and how good they are is misconstrued. And a lot of times that is created by coaches in for-profit programs that need those kids, right? So they boost them up. I've seen this happen in Canada a ton, where kids are they're overinflated, and because programs, there's not a ton of kids. So programs will say, oh, you're amazing. Like you'll come with us. Like you're going to get recruited. And they'll, coach will say like, I'll pull all my network and my strings and whatever, and I'll get you into whatever school you want to go to. That is crap. That's not true, because even if you are a coach of one of those for-profit programs and you do know a coach at a program, well, you're not going to tell that coach, you're not going to basically ruin your relationship with that coach by recommending a player that he can't have or doesn't need or isn't good enough to play for him, right? Because then that breaks that whole relationship down. So what that coach is telling that athlete can really be setting that athlete up for failure. I tend to coach from the other way. Like you might have heard me talk about this before, but I call it cream of the crop syndrome, right? When an athlete not cream of the crop, right? Cream of the crap. So an athlete thinks that they're the best. They may be the best kid on their team, best goalie, best attackman, best whatever, but that overall team isn't as good as everybody thinks they are. And that player gets these hyped up expectations, and then it gets like the rug gets ripped out from them too late, where they can't really readjust. They can't apply to other schools. They can't refocus, or they don't want to because they're so now like distraught and sad that their dream didn't happen, right? And that's not cool either. Okay, so I want to leave you with this, okay, and so that kind of that 5-tier, what are coaches looking for and how to get recruited to play lacrosse? They're looking for athletes who are good kids, right? Who've got grades, who can come to their school, who can play lacrosse, and they have the need for that player, okay? Your dreams as an athlete are out of your control in some ways, right? By all means, bust your butt and make the dream to play at Johns Hopkins or Denver or Notre Dame or Maryland or you name it, right? UNC, you name all those top teams. You should have that dream, because what that dream will do for you, hopefully, is it will click into you a work ethic that will help make that dream come true. However, along the way, you are always assessing. Oh, and there's my last thing. I always recommend to my athletes, and I've done this ever since I first started coaching in my early 20s back in Massachusetts at Bedford High School, is you need to get away from your team, okay? So I like travel teams. I like when guys can grow up and play as a team, which is really kind of that East Coast high school. Actually, it's the U.S. high school scenario, right? And Dom Stargy even recommends this. You know, it's something about having that team aspect. So having a team where you fight and you come to practice every day and you're sweating with each other and it's fun and you're talking about like you know, class and teachers and girlfriends and boyfriends, all that stuff. That's cool, okay? And that is worth so much in your development as a person, not just a lacrosse player. But I will say this, as soon as you can get away from your team, away from your travel team, go to an event or camp where you're there by yourself, all right? And parents like freak out about this sometimes. They're like, oh, my baby, I can't let them go by themselves. It's got to be like a family vacation. And if we can't afford it, they don't go. It's like, come on, you know, get your kid out the door, all right? Get them to grow up a little bit. Send them off to camp. Send them to an event. They'll be okay. And if they're not, you're going to learn early rather than late, right? So send them and help them understand what the goal is, right? And what their work ethic needs to be and what they need to have happen, right? Get them on the phone with someone like myself or a sports psychologist or anybody that can help focus. Do that now, because what happens is you're going to go and you're going to learn from all these other coaches. And what always happened to me was my athletes would come back to me after doing these events and they would go, hey coach, remember that thing you told me about like the slide and the cut and how to hold my stick and all that stuff? That other coach, the head coach at like whatever, he told me the same thing. And I'm like, inside I'm just grinning. I'm like, yep, that's why we do this, right? As coaches, right? But I need you to go away to almost get that reinforced, right? So reinforced, you know, I always say this, like Einstein, you know, because he's dad, right? If he was dad to his kids would still come to him and go, geez, dad, what do you know, quantum physics, really? What do you know, right? Just because he's dad. And we're like, as coaches, we're dad, right? So it's just like, get out of here, go learn, come back. Because the sooner you do that and the sooner you succeed as an athlete, all right, and as a parent, as soon as you get your athlete out the door and they do that and they succeed, the better they will be faster, okay? So we need to expedite that process. And you can do that like, you know, as soon as you're comfortable, right? If you've got a young athlete, maybe you drive them to a camp or you know, an overnight camp that's a drive away and you go home, right? Or, you know, for me in high school, I drove from South Weymouth, Massachusetts out to Cornell. I drove down to Maryland. I did 205 East. I did Gettysburg. I did all that stuff, right? And I did it by myself. So every athlete's different. I understand that, but the sooner you can do that, the better. Okay, so that's it. How to get recruited to play lacrosse. All right, keep an understanding of those criteria that coaches are working from. Then find out where you fit in there and what you need to work on. All right. From that, now by the time this is done, hopefully you'll have a chance to go check out the 3 key abilities video that I've done over at athletespecific.com, which is my strength and conditioning website, which I've kind of revamped and getting more content up and running on that every day. So have a look at that and then come back and tell me where you think you fit in or what you need to work on. All right, you can email me at coach@lacrossegoalietips.com or leave a comment below. Parents and anybody who runs programs, do me a favor, leave me a comment below and share it, like it, pin it, tweet it, Google Plus it, LinkedIn, like all that stuff. Do me a favor. It's over on this side. I always point over here. It's over here, right? So any of those, just do me a favor and share it. I'd appreciate that. But I want your comments. I want your feedback. So I know some of what I shared today is a little controversial, but you know, I had the conversation recently with a lacrosse parent in my Lacrosse Goalie University in my Tier 1 coaching program. And that's what really started the need to do this video. All right, I'm basically rehashing with you what I shared with that parent. And I think it's critical. It's super important. Okay? So, Coach Edwards with lacrossegoalietips.com and lacrossegoalieuniversity.com. Hope you enjoyed this video. I know this one was a little long, but I'll see you next week. Cheers.